see this building? I made $1 million a few months ago when I bought this building. My broker Scott called me up, told me he just got a phone call from a bank in Minnesota that just foreclosed on this building. They desperately wanted it off their books. I loved hearing the story. I got in my car, I drove over to the building. What did I find? A beautiful 72-unit building. I ended up buying that building. I bought that building for $1,125,000. I bought the building for $1,125,000, and the best part of the story, the building appraised for $2,170,000. Folks, that's over $1 million equity gain. What do we have here? We have a 72-unit property for $1,125,000, appraises for $2,170,000. That's $1,045,000 difference. Best of all, this property cash flows $15,000 to $20,000 a month. Imagine, what would you do with an extra $15,000 a month? I'm debt-free now. The only money I borrow now is to buy real estate. It wasn't always like that for me, but before we go into the story any further, I'd like to introduce myself to you. My name's Schnur, and I'm a real estate entrepreneur. Remember where you were? Remember where you were on 9/11, 2001? My world completely stopped with this indescribable event. I worked on the 101st floor of the World Trade Center. I left 12 hours before the towers fell. I left on a business trip, and I remember being woken up the next morning by some phone calls and turning on the TV and seeing what you were seeing. I asked myself, what have I done with my life, with my time, with my relationships, with my potential up until this point? If I hadn't been so lucky to not be at work that day on the 101st floor of the World Trade Center with my friends and colleagues, I would have died with them. Would I have lived my life up until that point? You can probably imagine being so close to the situation. The company I worked for lost 700 out of 1,000 employees, and I lost 40 out of 44 teammates. I had to make a dramatic change in my life. I wanted to finally have that baby that my wife and I had been putting off because we thought we couldn't afford up until this point. When you have a turning point like a 9/11 in your life, everything becomes crystal clear. So my wife and I, we did have that baby. And I did leave corporate America, and I did start a small business. And most of all, I started buying real estate. I started buying real estate that started creating this passive income in my life that made all the difference. Because if I didn't work, the money was still coming in. And that was the kind of confidence and strength and that passive income. That's what I needed behind myself to go forward. So now, if we can just fast forward to 2008. I have a 4-year-old. It was a Sunday night. I'm putting him to sleep, giving him that goodnight kiss. And he goes, "Daddy, I'll see you next week." And then I realized, I knew what he was saying. He knew that I was going to leave the house before he woke up, and I was probably going to arrive home after he went to sleep. You see, one of my small businesses became my source of active income. It became my job. So what I realized that night was that I completely needed to make another major change in my life, like the one I made after 9/11. I realized that I was so dependent upon my active income, my little business, my small business that I created. I realized that I needed to gear up the real estate machine and create more passive income for me and my family. And that's exactly what I did. Currently at the time I owned around 50 single-family houses. Well, I went out and I bought another 52 single-family houses. I did some bank deals, and we'll talk more about those bank deals later on in one of my videos. But I also realized that if I can take 100 single-family houses, 102, and take all that income and find it in one place, like in an apartment building, well then I can double my cash flow. That's exactly what I did. Well, I started off buying a smaller apartment complex, and I think it's a great idea for you because you can get your hands around this, right? You already own a house, you rent a house, or maybe even own some single-family houses that you rent. This Meadow Creek apartment building, 34-unit building, great kind of project to get your hands around. You can easily cash flow a few $1,000s to $10,000 a month run correctly. So I bought this apartment complex for $450,000 from a hedge fund in New York City last December. They needed to get it off their books. One of those deals where, you know, someone's just going to throw it at you at almost any price. And that's what I did. I showed them a number really low, and they still sold it to me. So I paid $450,000 for this. Check this out. It appraises for $1,190,000. $1,190,000. So what do we got? Pasadena, Texas, 34-unit building, Meadow Creek, paid $450,000. Praises for $1,190,000. Folks, that's $740,000 equity gain. Are you kidding me? My bank loved the deal. Not only did they refinance my investment out, I walked with $250,000. Can you imagine? I left the closing table with $250,000. Property still cash flows. What would you do with $250,000? I can tell you what I did. Took a 2-month vacation to Japan, went to Hawaii for 2 weeks, went to the Grand Cayman for 2 weeks, paid off my Range Rover. Imagine. So folks, your dreams, think about it. If you can cash flow your dreams, if I can show you how to cash flow your dreams, would you feel more financially secure? Would you get to that goal quicker? These are the ideas that we're talking about when it comes to buying apartment buildings and creating massive passive cash flow. Let me show you this. Folks, you see this? These are cashier's checks. They come in 24/7 from all my tenants. I'm paying down my properties. I'm making the cash flow. Are you kidding me? Look at all these cashier's checks. Not only that, you see this? Bank scanner. My bank puts them in all my leasing offices, in my home offices. It's fantastic. Checks come in via the P.O. box or the drop boxes of the leasing offices. Just feed them right into this machine, goes online banking, bookkeeper gets her copy, goes right into QuickBooks. Bang, folks, that's it. Paperless, completely paperless. There's so many ways of running an apartment business these days. You can do it yourself, or if you want, you can hire third-party management. Again, we'll talk more about that in my next video. We can cash flow your dreams. I have a special fund set up in my bank account. I call it the Dream Account. Every month, one apartment building deposits $5,000 a month into it. $5,000 a month goes to my dream fund. And I spend it. It's a reward. I deserve it, right? It's the cash flow, and that's what we're going to do for you. You can buy apartment buildings cheaper than what they sold for in 1960 and 1970. 30, 40 years of equity right now are being wiped away from apartment buildings out there. Here's another building. Oak Point Apartments, 162-unit building. I bought this property $1.5 million under where someone just paid for it 24 months ago out of foreclosure. This is another property we're going to talk about next video when you come back. I'm going to show you how to find these foreclosures and how to beat your competition so you can get to the deal first. So folks, leave me with your comments and your questions about the video below, because I read every single email that I get, and we're going to send out on Facebook when our next live video is coming out, so stay tuned.